What's up, Booktube? It's Leah Cooper, and today I am going to talk to you about all of the books I read in November. So, as I mentioned in my past couple of videos, the end of summer, beginning of fall was a very busy time for me. I kind of had a reading slump, but I would say November is the month where I kind of hit my stride again. I started getting really excited about what I was reading. I was checking out some really awesome things from the library. I was also reading off my shelves. In November, I instituted a policy where for every book I read from the library, I had to read one from my shelf, and that has carried into December, and so far it's working pretty well. I have very positive feelings about the month of November, and I want to talk to you about the books that I read. I apologize if I look a little bit tired and, I don't know, not put together. I just worked out and took a shower, and I couldn't be bothered to put on a full face of makeup, so I slapped on some lipstick and mascara and called it good enough. I feel like that is a sentiment many of us can probably relate to in the month of December. Because I don't know about you, but I've been trying to get a Christmas tree this week, and it's Thursday. I still haven't succeeded. It's been a pain in my ass. But enough complaining about being tired. We're all tired this time of year. Let's talk about the books. So we'll start off with a couple of stats. Even though I called this like the month I got my stride back, I did only technically finish 4 books for a total of 1,203 pages. But that means that on average, the books were at least 300 pages. So they were, full-length novels. It wasn't just like me reading a bunch of really short novellas, because it's always easier for me to read like short fiction and novellas just to like keep my momentum up with those, so I feel really good about that. I also started a couple of longer books in the month of November that I will be finishing in December. So the first thing I finished in the month of November, and the only novella, though it was a longer novella, was 7 of Infinities by Elliot de Bedard. This is I don't know what the chronological order. I think this is the second book in her Zuyu universe. It follows after the Tea Master and the Detective. It has new characters, and it is another romance between a scholar and a sentient mind ship. There is a murder mystery element to this one again, but there is an investigation, but neither of the main characters is like an investigator. The mind ship is actually like an con artist, and the scholar is someone who basically forged her scholarly credentials to raise her position in society, so she's got like a dark secret. And I really liked the beginning of this book. I thought it was really strong. The mystery element was really interesting. Character dynamics were really good. I didn't love the end. The kind of final confrontation is where it all kind of fell apart for me. And that's probably just personal taste, not really gelling with like the characters' choices. I ended up giving this like a 3 or 3.5 stars. I do think it's worth reading, especially if you've read other entries in this universe. And I will say I continue to really love Bedard's universe here. So we're talking about a Vietnamese-inspired galactic empire with mind ships who are sentient, who are birthed by human women and are implanted in crafts, and there's a lot of like personal kind of technology, a lot of that's almost worn as like jewelry or accessories, but they're also extensions of the self. And there's a lot in this one about kind of our projection of ourselves and how we literally in this universe can change our appearance to some degree. Anyway, it was interesting, but I do think Tea Master and the Detective was the better novella. After that, I finished listening to an audiobook, which was River Secrets by Shannon Hale. This is the 3rd book in the Books of Bayern series, so follows The Goose Girl and Anna Burning. This one, the main character in this one is Razo, who was a supporting character in the first 2 books, and I listened to this on audiobook. It was a full cast narration. I really loved it. I think I have since finished all 4 books in the series, and I think this is my favorite one of the series. Razo is kind of like an underdog character. He's not like heroic like Finn. He doesn't have magic like Izzy or Enna. And he has a really great kind of mentor relationship with Captain Talone in this one, which I really, really loved. I really liked his romance. This book follows Razo, Finn, Talone as they go to try to, on a diplomatic mission to the country that they were at war with and Enna burning, and they're trying to basically create a peace deal with these people. And Razo is discovering that his strengths might lie in other areas, but he can do a lot with his own unique abilities. And he's just like a really great character. So I thoroughly enjoyed this entry into the series. And once again, I would highly recommend, if you're looking for a YA fantasy series, to pick up the books of Bayern. Then the next thing I read was a physical book off my shelves and also off my 15 books to read in 2021 TBR, and that was The Witches of Echo Park. I have since unhauled this book. I stuck it in a little free library and took a book from it, in exchange for a book from that little free library. But I did finally read it. This is the first book in a series written by Amber Benson. Amber Benson of the actress who played Tara on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. This is her second series, and this is urban fantasy. I thought from the cover that this was going to be like a cozy urban fantasy, but this was much more like a sexy urban fantasy. So it wasn't quite what I was in the mood for. And also, well, let me back up for a second. So this book is about a woman who gets a late night call from the woman who raised her, a woman who she grew up calling her aunt. She's actually like a very, very distant relative, but who raised her. She tells her that she has cancer, and so she flies back to California to be with her aunt and to try to help take care of her. And what she doesn't realize is that her aunt is the leader of the local Echo Park coven of witches, and her aunt is going to have her replace her as the head of the coven because it was like foretold by a dream walker well before our protagonist is born. And so the book follows the aunt and the coven introducing the world of magic to the protagonist, and there's stuff with the tide is coming, the flood is coming. I think the flood is coming. And what does that mean? And, shadowy foresight. It reminds me a little bit of the TV show Charmed, actually. Yeah, I think it reminds me quite a bit of Charmed, of anything. It kind of has that, like, late 90s feel to it, too. So that kind of leads me to one of my criticisms, is that it felt a little dated, even though it was like a mid-2000s. It was like 2013. They have cell phones. I mean, like, it's not that old of a book, but it felt much older than it actually was, and that was just weird. And it felt white. So then on top of that, I really didn't like the romance. Like, I hated the romance, and it was just so icky. Not because it was, like, problematic, but just because it was, like, love at first sight that turned into, I have a gaping leg wound, but here, let me go home and have sex with you kind of a thing, which I'm not a huge fan of. And then there was a graphic depiction of a rape in a flashback scene, and I mean, I guess the ending was okay because, the misogynists, they fought back the misogynists, but I don't know. It just didn't come together for me. I didn't like the characters. I thought a lot of the relationships between the women in the coven were strange. I thought the friendship between the protagonist and her best friend was weird. I didn't like it. It was just like, it was just unpleasant to read. And so I won't be continuing with the series, and I'm really sad about that because I really wanted to like the book, but I just didn't. So I think I gave it like 2 stars. I gave it 3. I think I'm rounding up on that 3. So yeah, but the one thing I will say about this book is it helped me kind of just realize something. I used to read a lot of urban fantasy. Urban fantasy was probably like my favorite genre. And I mean, I think that's pretty common for a lot of us who were children of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, right? And I do still like urban fantasy, but it's really not my favorite genre anymore, and I'm not a huge fan of reading it, because I've tried to read a couple of urban fantasy series over the last, I would say, 4 years since I started my channel. But before that, trying to like try out authors. I tried out Patricia Briggs. I tried out Anita Blake, who wrote Anita Blake. I can't think of the author's name. And I read Jim Butcher in high school. When I was in my mid-20s, I tried out some of his other series, and I can't get into them anymore. They don't usually seem to work for me, and I don't know if it's like the characters, or if it's like the writing styles, or if it's like the combination of like the character personalities and like the first person narration. But in all of these, I think one of the biggest things has been weird author choices, like the fucking shape-shifting rat people and Anita Blank. That was like a hard no. Or terrible alpha males who are just gross, which was my problem with Patricia Briggs. And I don't love urban fantasy anymore. I really don't. I'm not saying I'll never read an urban fantasy again, but I will say that I don't think my tastes lie there anymore. And this book really helped me realize that. So it was educational for that purpose. Tastes change and evolve as we get older, as we read more. That's not a bad thing. There's no like moral judgment attached to that. They just do. Like, our interests shift, our moods shift, what we're in the mood for shifts. And I definitely have found that 5 or 10 years ago, I was not interested in kind of like sword and sorcery or epic fantasy, and I'm a lot more inclined to pick one of those up now and enjoy it, and I'm not as inclined to like enjoy some of the urban fantasy I've been trying to pick up. So anyway, that was just kind of like a personal tangent that I realized while reading The Witches of Echo Park. And this brings us to the last thing I read in the month, and the thing I actually really, really did like. I gave it a 4 stars, and that was Swordstone Table. This is a multi-author anthology. It was edited by Swapna Krishna and Jen Northington. And this is a new release. It came out this past year, and it is short stories retelling various stories from Arthurian legend, and it's divided or organized in 3 parts, kind of riffing off T.H. White's Once a Future King, which are past, present, and future. So we've got past retellings, which are set in like the historical era of the original Arthurian legends. We've got present short stories, which take place in the 20th and 21st century. And then we've got a couple of future short stories, which are sci-fi futuristic Arthurian retellings. This book was like solidly a 4.5, verging on 5-star collection for me through the first half, and then it was more of like a 3.5 star for the second half. So I have a more detailed breakdown of the stories I really, really loved over on Goodreads. I'll leave a link to my Goodreads review of this book because I don't have a physical copy anymore, but I'll leave that review down below, because I list a bunch of the stories that were huge standouts for me. I would say almost every single story from the past section of the book was a hit. I loved them all. Roshani Chakshi had a retelling of Elaine and Lancelot that I was literally sitting in a laundromat crying. It was so good, and there were several amazing stories in this collection. I should also say the conceit in this collection is that they're Arthurian legends being retold by authors of color, and many of them are queered. So a ton of diversity. Just it's a fantastic collection. If you at all are interested in Arthurian legends or tales or stories, I would highly suggest picking it up. The present section, the middle of the book, the stories that take place in the 20th and 21st century were a lot more hit or miss. I would say about 3 or 4 of them I really liked, including the first one. It's very long, and it's like Uther and Arthur Pendragon as gold tycoons at the end of the 1800s, early 1900s, and it's all told in like newspaper clippings and journal entries. That was amazing. The last story in that section has a present day Elaine as a barista having visions of their past lives as she meets the reincarnated version of like Arthur, Guinevere, and Lancelot. That was also really good, and such like I loved the ending of that one. Really amazing. Some of the other ones in the middle, I was kind of There's one with like Arthur as a baseball player that I was like, whatever, I just don't care. And then surprisingly, the future section, I think it only had 3 short stories, or maybe 4. It was the shortest section in the book, and it was also the biggest letdown. I thought the book would kind of take a turn and I'd really like the rest of the stories. I ended up only liking the very last story in the collection, which is a Sir Gawain and the Green Knight set on a futuristic, was it Mars? That one was really good. That one was really interesting and had some like fascinating like ideas about personal IP and reality television, and Arthur as a reality television star. So yeah, I liked that one, but the rest of them I was very meh about. However, so that being said, it got a lower rating from me because I have to admit there were just there was a chunk of the book that I was not interested in. But like the rest of the book that did land for me was so fantastic. I would still recommend checking out this collection if you like King Arthur story. Like absolutely go out, get it. For nothing else, read that first section, the past, and like read the first story out of the present. But I would say read the whole collection because I think there's just a lot of really great ideas and a lot of talent being showcased in this collection. And if you want, like I said, more detailed breakdowns of which stories I think you should especially check out my Goodreads review. Okay, so those are the 4 things I've read in the month of November. I think I've rambled long enough, especially for only 4 books. Reading away at like 3 more books currently, 3 long chonker books, and they're all going really, really well. And I'm actually like enjoying all of them. So my December has started strong. That's really exciting because I need to read 10 books in the month of December to hit my Goodreads goal. I've got this whole stack above me just out of frame, which were chosen by my boyfriend in a little boyfriend picks my TBR tag. If you're interested in watching that video, we had a lot of fun filming it. I'll leave it linked in the cards and down below. And yeah, I think that's all I have for you today. Next week I will be back possibly with a tag video. I'm gonna start shifting into doing kind of year-end wrap-up stuff, best of, most disappointing lists, that kind of thing. So keep your eyes peeled for that, but I'm not doing Vlogmas or anything like that. So I'll see you when I see you next Wednesday, if I stick to my schedule, which I'm trying to do. Wish me luck. Let me know what your last multi-author short story anthology collection that you read and finished was down below, because I'm always on the hunt for more of those. I really like, it probably sounds weird, but there's like certain editors I like look for when they're putting together anthologies, because like they tend to be, you know, really good anthologies. So I'm always on the market. I'm always on the hunt. And I think that's one of those kind of niche categories of book that people might buy a lot of, but I don't necessarily see people reading. And man, I love them. So I'll see you guys in my next video. Should be out next Wednesday. Happy reading.